What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, news. If it impacts you as a Fort Worthian, we discuss it. We give you one big story, 3 short stories, wins, loss, and actions. I'm with my co-host, Ann Zeta, and our producer, Wesley Kirk.
Good afternoon, which is a different time for us. But
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we were turning up at the Oligarchy Tour.
That was what we did yesterday evening. That is true.
And we had to gather.
It's been a busy time, and we've been together a lot. But we have not been recording a podcast at the regular time. Did anybody reach out to you asking what happened this morning? Because I had somebody text me.
I don't think I did.
You did put it out on our social media.
Yeah.
To be looking for it after.
Yeah, I got a couple likes on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's all good, but we got a lot to talk about. So let's go ahead and dive into the big story, which is Bernie Sanders here in Fort Worth.
So yesterday was a big day because we had the gather. And so normally we would have the gather and then record the podcast after. But because Bernie Sanders was coming to town and most of us, if not all of us, were planning to attend that rally, we put off recording the podcast until after, also so that we could talk a little bit about the rally that happened here in Fort Worth.
Yes.
Which was super exciting. I think everybody that I talked to was very excited. But after the fact, I wish I had told more people about it, because as people shared being there, 2 things I had FOMO about. I didn't walk around more and run into all the people that were there that I knew, because that was a lot of people, and that would have been a lot of fun.
Yes.
I sat in a seat. My watch kept telling me to get up, and I did not get up. I wish I had done more of that.
That is a true statement.
Yeah. And
I agree.
It was incredibly well attended.
Yeah.
I will say that. There was a section as far away as you could possibly get from the stage that was more sparsely filled in, but there were still people sitting in those sections.
Yeah.
And the concern I had was that if anybody was there taking pictures to try to, get into like the kind of battles that our president gets into about attendance at things, that they could show pictures that made it look like the attendance was sparse, but it absolutely was not. There was a lot of people there.
Yeah. And even like when we were there, I was having so many friends like text pictures of me sitting there. I was like, where are you at? Like, I kept seeing more and more people I know. And then on Facebook last night, just tons and tons of people I know were posting pictures of, like, man, I was scanning the crowd. There's so many people I missed. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, the second bowl wasn't used.
Right.
And so when we were mathing last week, we were like, oh, that's 14,000 people. We were gassed up after the No Kings rally. Like, oh, yeah. I mean, we had all these people at the No Kings rally. I think one of the interesting things about it for me is, how many more people would have been there if AOC was on the tour?
There were a lot of people saying if AOC was going to be there, that they would definitely be there.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting, I think that's an interesting play there. It's like, man, what is the power of AOC on the Oligarch Tour and the voice of, kind of the progressive movement? I think that's an interesting part. And it would have been nice to see. I think some people would say it would be 30% increase of attendance. Like, would that be a right number?
Well, and also they only kind of announced that Bernie was coming to Fort Worth like a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of people that didn't know.
Yeah.
And then Craig Kazar was there, and he is local from Texas.
Yeah.
And so I think he spoke to a lot of people and got some attendance there. But I don't know that everybody is as familiar with him
because
as some other folks.
I'm familiar from like when he got on Austin City Council,
Right,
and
me
like
too.
what a big change that was for Austin City Council. And I guess I haven't kept up with him enough because I didn't
his
even
grassroots organizing, that's what got him started in all of this. So he has a big following in that. But like you said, it's mainly those of us that kind of follow that politics.
Yeah. Well, I just didn't even realize that now he's the head of the Progressive Caucus. And I'm like, good for him. I like him.
And I think, to me, Beto was the best speech. But
He's had a lot of practice.
Yeah, and I also think he's the one actually potentially running for something. So I think he's out here sharpening his saw. He definitely has someone back on staff seeing when we scream the loudest, what works, what doesn't. You can just tell he's putting in a lot of effort to craft a new message. I just don't know how exciting will the base get. And then really, I think a lot of for Beto is how do you navigate how I feel like the Republicans have such a good job at marketing against him. Which I think is the more challenging part, as I think we can all get excited around Beto. So I think that's also the part I'm excited to see, but people don't know if he's going to try again at governor. Is he going to do Senate?
Well, I think a couple people pointed out that we have to stop pointing at the bad things and then come up with our own message that is inspiring to people. Yeah. And I think it was good to hear several people saying that.
He was inspiring.
Yeah.
Well, and also like the fact that he's not actively running for something now, I feel like this was the most out there, progressive, like idealistic version of Beto that I've heard, because he's not having to like tamper down to appeal to, folks that may not align with his views. So it was nice to see.
Yep. And there was a shout out for Elisa Simmons.
Yes.
Yep.
As well.
That was a big one.
So, and then some call outs.
I feel like there was multiple. Didn't Bernie shout her out too?
I think so.
Yeah.
I remember Beto specifically.
Yeah.
Not
and then
100%.
the gerrymandering that's happening here in Tarrant County and how, and then the whole what happens in Fort Worth, so goes Texas, so goes the country.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think that that's inspiring to people and makes people think that maybe if they get up and actually do something alongside other folks, that they'll have results instead of being disappointed.
Yeah, it was outstanding, and to see Bernie, who knows, I mean, like, to come to Fort Worth, like that's amazing. I mean, and to see this, I wonder what their data or their methodicalness of, because they went to Amarillo, they were going to McAllen, like what is about these spaces that entice to have the tour there.
We haven't even mentioned Jim Hightower too, because
he was
some
great.
of his comments were hilarious.
Yeah. He was at the after party at the Progressive thing for a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah, and he spoke. But yeah.
See, I knew somebody was going to tell me something that was going to make me regret that I didn't go to the after party.
And that was cool too. And but yeah, and then I think also the local guys, the local people. My one knock is we should have had a woman speaker. Deborah Peoples was in the arena.
Speaker, a union person.
Yeah.
Who is from Tarrant County. So.
Right.
Yeah, but it would have been.
But
nice.
there was a lack of women on
I mean,
that.
when you just got two white guys and then Greg Kassar, and then I think it would have been nice to kind of have that woman presence up there as a politician.
Yeah. And I only saw Deborah Peoples as far as people from like the city council attending. Yeah. And I don't know that others didn't. That's just who I saw with my own two eyes.
We were all posted up next to each other, so hard to know who was on the other side of the arena.
Hence, we all should have walked around a little bit more.
It's hard. I mean, everybody's struggling to save seats. So
yeah.
But it would have been cool though if like Commissioner Simmons would have spoke, or even Deborah. I mean, like just because, just some type of that would have been a nice touch to some local people for such a big opportunity.
I agree.
In our city.
One of my favorites was one of the local speakers. I forgot his name. He was a teacher.
Eddie.
Yeah. I feel like he listens to the 817 podcast because he had a lot of the same talking points. I feel like he saw your Wake Up Fort Worth
well, didn't
speech.
Somebody think he was you?
Well, he's a tanned, balded man with a beard who's also in education. So
who made the same Sleeping Panther metaphor?
Yeah, he said the Sleeping Panther and Wake Up Fort Worth. Yep. But some people were messaging me like, "Yeah, you did a great job today," and I was like, "Hey,
not me.
I won't. I'll take it." But hey, that was Ernie. But
inspired
honestly,
by you.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome.
It was a great time. Only thing I would say is y'all left me.
Oh, I know. We were carpooling in order to not have too many people have to pay for parking there at Dickies Arena, and we told Wesley we would be leaving at a certain time.
7 minutes before they said they would leave, and they'd already left. So I had to go home and ride my bike.
We're so proud of you for riding your bike.
Exactly.
That's so good.
I refuse to pay for parking.
Yeah. And looking at and sorry about that because it was the Tackets and everybody else kind of.
I gave you enough shit over it yesterday.
And the media guy, Mark, our media guy, who shot out with his photographers.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like everyone was ready to get there. The Star Telegram was saying at least 3,000 North Texans joined the event.
That number feels light.
Yeah, that number feels very light.
I feel like it was more than that. Because they were saying there was at least 2,000 that was in Burnett Park at the No Kings rally, and there were definitely more.
Let me kind of push.
Very conservative.
It says at least 3,000 North Texans joined labor leaders in chants of what kind of power, people power. So maybe when the labor union people were here before, like when people were still coming in. So it was basically saying during the chant part of one of the local union members was 3,000 people, and it took a while to fill up before we were for people who were there since 3:30.
Well, yeah, and I was like, what are we going to be doing between 3:30 and 6?
Hanging out.
And I didn't know there was going to be food. I was worried about that. There was food,
good music.
There was the music,
the old 97s.
Yeah.
Well, and that choir, what a way to start singing Change Is Gonna Come.
Yeah.
Oh, that was
a way
good.
to kick it off.
And it sounded great in there.
It did.
Well, it's a nice arena.
Yeah.
They do a good job.
Well, we will see what this goes to, but man, what an incredible time, and to see so many local people. I mean, the momentum, and to see where that momentum goes from here. And so we got to move into some local stuff, though, and move into some short stories.
Earlier, you were saying what you think caused them to choose Fort Worth, and I feel like they said it plenty of times. They had their eyes on what was happening with the Tarrant County redistricting stuff and knew that we can't let that happen more in more places, and we need people power to make it happen. And so there's eyes on the County Commissioners Court, which leads us to short story number 1 about Commissioners Court. You want to take it away?
Yeah. So now this news article came out on June 17th with the Star Telegram, basically talking about how the Tarrant County Commissioners canceled their meeting because 3 members of the 5 were absent. Commissioner Roderick Miles, Matt Krause, and Manny Ramirez were not present. But basically, what was supposed to happen at that meeting?
It's supposed to be a big meeting.
Yeah, the meeting was supposed to decide on a $250,000 contract with PILF to represent the county in the commissioners' courts against the lawsuit over redistricting. So it's to remember that we went through the redistricting process. They voted to racially gerrymander the map with the map 7, and then a couple, I guess, people with the Lone Star Project decided to do the lawsuit, and now everyone's should be more up in arms because now we're trying to use tax dollars to give $250,000 to the same people who organized this map process.
That's what I was just about to ask. That is flabbergasting to me. We're going to pay the same people who did the maps that are now being challenged to defend the maps.
Well, and also, like, we all knew this was coming a mile away. Like,
right, because $30,000 would not have been enough for them to do this work if they didn't know there was more money coming in some other way. Yep. And that was all that the judge could approve without more folks being on board for it.
Yeah.
Like, the only way he could put it on the agenda, there's a cap, I think, to what they can individually put on the agenda and spend.
Yeah. And something Ernie did say in his speech at the Bernie tour is he talked about how there was like a $6 million lawsuit at Farmers Branch that was wasted due to O'Hare's activities. And so, again, we called this out. We had people show up, multiple public comments. PILF didn't show up to anything. Like, we gave them $30,000 to do their job, and they didn't do anything. And what does it give you? A $250,000 contract.
The other briefing they were going to do at the meeting that they didn't have enough people show up to was a briefing about the operational impacts of redistricting.
Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what the city council resolution was talking about.
Exactly.
It fucks
this
up
is something
all of the
they
money
should
and
have
spending.
done.
Yep.
And
should have done before redistricting.
Mm-hmm.
And currently, right now, like, you're right. So Precinct 2 has 2 maintenance centers, and Precinct 1 doesn't. So
they took away all their roads. So I don't know what they need to maintain. They literally took away the maintenance facility and anything that needed maintenance.
Yeah. So again, economic engines in Black and brown communities that you take away that serve jobs that were represented by Black leadership now are not represented or served and possibly not staffed by the people in those communities because they took it all away.
Yep.
And I think the big thing that we all have to understand here is that, like, we all have had to advocate for our work. We all have had to validate for our work and prove our work to people who invest in us, regardless if you have a job that you're trying to keep, a grant that you're trying to serve, or a donor that you're trying to, like, make sure they renew and support you. Like, that is a part of the economic accountability that we have as people to our cities and places we work. But for some reason, this is, to me, when I talk about, like, white male privilege or like unfairness, is that PILF did jack crap for their $30,000. They didn't explain the maps. They didn't do any new data. They didn't show up to public events. And then you, as a person who is trying to keep your own job, has to watch someone get a $250,000 grant out of your tax dollars that you're paying to the city that is telling you that your work isn't good enough, but their work is good enough?
I wouldn't be surprised if it's just straight up their business plan. It's like, hey, we will do a bad job and we will make our money defending that bad job that we did.
Like, yeah.
That's an interesting take. That's probably, I wonder what they did in other places, because they've done this work in other places.
And
so
that's exactly what happened last time, too, is that they did a bad job and then a massive lawsuit. And it's like, they're getting paid for their time in court.
So I guess people could show up on July 1st and at least vocalize that they don't think that this is who they should be hiring with this extra $250,000.
Exactly.
I think what's also like tough about like momentum here is there were so many people at the redistricting maps, and I felt like it was hard. There's not have been really any new news since June 17th about this. So I'm interested to see what kind of momentum and positioning happens to prepare for July 1st. This is a great next step to take all that county momentum to another place. And I think that's what I'm most thoughtful of as we think about, okay, we had redistricting, then we had no Kings, now we had Bernie. And what is that cadence to not burn people out, but to continue to inspire people to come in and join the fight so that we can all still participate when we can and can't make certain meetings. Mm-hmm. There's enough of us still continuing to keep the power accountable.
Yeah, and I think we talked at the last pod about rallying and protesting versus the doing something part, and that all of these opportunities have had a component where organizations that are continually doing something in between the times are available to share the information about what they're doing and provide you pathways to plug into those. So
that you can help where you can, but then also like keep your ears peeled for when they say, okay, now everyone push all at once. Yeah. Before we move on, I also wanted to point out that at that county commissioners court meeting that was canceled, they were also supposed to have a briefing about the LGBTQ historical marker. And we talked about that last week on the pod, and I'm very curious to hear an update on that. And so now that will be on July 1st, but I'm curious if y'all have heard anything about.
I haven't seen any updated information on that other than people bringing forward the fact that other markers went through the same operational process that this marker went through. And so the question being, why was this one pulled when others went through? Not that we want to pull the others because they were merited as well, but they definitely need to explain themselves. But I think we can guess why.
The battle too, though, is like, how does it play? Because it's our city. The city's 46% of Tarrant County. It's during Pride Month. We just did a resolution. Like, it just, the seesawing to residents of being safe to be who you are is just not healthy right now.
Yeah.
And that is the responsibility of city leadership.
Yep. I think it'd be good for folks to show up on July 1st when that briefing is supposed to happen and just keep an ear out because this might be part of a longer fight.
Yep.
So that can be a call to action in the middle of this broadcast.
Yes.
There we go.
And moving on to short story number 2, we're now going to talk about City Council, who is looking to vote on suspending some of the duties of Diversity and Inclusion Department Tuesday, tomorrow or today, I guess, when you are hearing this at the 24th City Council meeting at 10 a.m. We're talking about a Trump administration request that if they're going to give cities federal funding, Fort Worth is receiving $277 million of funding, that they would need to comply with the federal orders to stop DEI initiatives and anything that's addressing racial, ethnic, and gender disparities. And so this vote is coming to us, and this is a big vote because we just got off of a Pride resolution. We just got off of celebrating Juneteenth. And now we're going into a Tuesday meeting where our city council leaders are deciding on how to mobilize and protect staff and dollars at the same time while not weighing off of our values of we are a diverse majority minority city. Wesley, and what are your guys' takes?
I got super confused because some of the headlines are a little misleading, where it starts off saying that they're looking at, suspending diversity and equity department or the diversity and inclusion department completely. And then you get into the body of the article and it basically says, some of the things that they do that are specific to the things that the Trump administration has been highlighting across the entire country and telling people, we're not going to give you money if you do these things. So many places have known that this was coming. I think we all should have known this was coming. I think that we were all talking about Project 2025 and what it was going to do. And I think that many of us hoped that some of these things would just not come to fruition. Not everybody read the 900-page Project 2025. Some people did. Some people started to share little blips of that with folks.
And you also saw it on universities. They attacked the universities' DEI programs. They attacked
Oh, it's happening.
Yeah, Department of Ed. So to me, it's like, and when you look up, I was trying my best, and I even used ChatGPT. I was like, what are other cities doing around DEI? And what I saw was articles from 2 months ago, like discussing this. So where I'm confused is like, how do we get to a point where now we have to rush this? Because now it also, looking at the working session, there seems to be some grants, DOT grants, some aviation grants that we need to apply for, but we can't apply for unless we check this box that we no longer have these like DEI parameters in our diversity and inclusion department.
And well, because also that $277.1 million is not just for the diversity and inclusion department.
Correct.
It is for a massive number of departments.
It's 10% of the whole city budget.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's literally impacting way more than just that department.
Yeah. And
And to your point, there are other cities that were looking at these things and universities that were looking at these things months ago and making some changes in order to still stay eligible for that funding. Because you can look at things from the measuring of disparities and not call out race, gender, all the things that the Trump administration has basically sent out a list of things, words that are not acceptable to be used anywhere. And then people just go wipe them off of their website. So
Yeah.
I think the disparity work can still continue. And that's the important thing when looking at this. And I just don't know how they can do this in one meeting.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the lack of leadership and values of who Fort Worth is. What is our line in the sand? When do we say, you know what, this is who we're going to be? You can't advocate for LGBTQ communities and march with Opal Lee and then not have, I'm not saying that it's easy to tell the community we have to do this, but y'all know how we really feel about things, blank, 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 whatever the thing is. And what I'm afraid is whatever happens on Tuesday, there's going to be no advocacy about diversity, equity, inclusion. There's going to be no proactive, hey, here's what we're going to do to ensure that these people are so uplifted and supported. And it's just going to be, we need to do this because we're going to lose jobs and we're going to do this. And I understand that. But again, it's hollow to why do people of color constantly have to take less for the benefits of other things that are economically developed? And it's always on the people who have the least amount of resources, who seems to have to just be like, okay, I guess you have to do what you have to do.
Well, and I think it's hard too, because I think the battles that have gotten us to the point where we have put these ordinances together and we have put these initiatives together have been hard fought. Mm-hmm. And unless there's a champion continuing to make sure that they stay in place, some of them have already started to kind of ebb and flow, even before this has occurred. So there's a lack of trust, a concern that if there isn't something spelled out saying these are our values, this is what we believe, written down somewhere, that who's going to hold anybody accountable? Correct.
And that's like, and it's just like the classic crumble. It's like when it was the Mercy Culture stuff, it was, oh, but we could get sued. When it was Tim O'Hare, it's like, oh, but they got the votes. When it was Trump and administration federal, but they got our money. So it's like, we never are like, we see these bad things happening, trying to push. I mean, this is called oppression. I mean, I feel like I wish I could have taken the city council on a trip to Kimball Art Museum, because we just had an exhibit called The Modern Art and Politics in Germany from 1910 to 1945. And the exhibition concluded, and we can't go now, but what it basically was showing is the political climate back then, and it highlighted and reflected the shifting political landscape at that time, from the German Empire to the rise of Adolf Hitler and World War II. And it wasn't a bold stroke that happened. It was through silence and small surrenders. And that to me is when do we say that $200 million is enough? How much is democracy? How much is freedom? When do we say, you know what if the next one is, hey, Fort Worth PD, you got to start helping us with ICE or all your money's taken up? I bet we stand up and say 6 no to that one, or get the votes. It's like, I feel like there has to just be a clarity of who we are and what do we stand. And it's too much going back and forth with the wind, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think there really are only hard decisions. I mean, there's no easy solution to this. And I think that...
And people are okay with hard decisions if they know who you are and what you're trying to do and stand up. We can't see if you have a chess move when we don't even know if you have a backbone. That's just the hard part. That's just the hard part here. And
I'm not here to argue with you about that.
and I think we should have we're probably 90% of people who are listening to this pod are going to hear the pod after the results. But ideally, someone asked for a continuation because in working session, Jay Chapa, the first Hispanic city manager, said that we're going to look at programs to provide services, but they won't be around these things, but people in that demographic could apply. And I'm like,
well, if you're measuring disparities, I think oftentimes you will find that you're helping Black and brown and women and all of that. So you can do that, and I think that's what he's indicating. And to me, I feel like it needs to be held until there's more legs to whatever that means.
Well, especially because this was presented at a work session last Tuesday, and then on Thursday they decided they were going to vote on it. Like, there's been so little time to think, like, wait, are we doing the right thing? Like, yes, it's 10% of the budget on the line, but what does this say about Fort Worth if we're going to go on the record having to vote against diversity, equity, inclusion being a key value of the city?
Well, and it may be bumping up against the July break. There could be all kinds of deadlines around whether these grants, those deadlines could be falling right now. And back to the several other places and cities and organizations such as higher education were talking about this several months ago.
Yeah,
exactly.
And we all knew this was coming from Project 2025.
That's what's so disappointing is, like, you see this a lot in the city that they're reacting to things and then we have to react to that. And there's so little proactive thinking, both from the city and, like, it's hard for us because we're constantly having to react to their failings.
Yeah, and I think the reacting thing is kind of where we get when we have such a lean staff that has a hard time doing anything beyond reacting, because the stuff that comes through the door on a daily basis keeps them very, very busy. So to actually be able to be proactive is a definite challenge.
And I mean, again, I think you're right on the whole proactive, because we just went through Juneteenth and there was a lot of people talking on stages and no one talking about this vote.
Well, partly because they couldn't. Like, the timeline is so incredibly short that, like, you had to be glued to your phone on Juneteenth to know.
Well, I mean, I'm proud that you watched the work session.
Yeah.
AJ watched the work session. I did not watch all of that work session. I missed that part of it. I did go and look at another part of it that I.
But I mean, a lot of people, are big people. I feel like oftentimes the diversity stuff is a part that, obviously, as a Black or brown person, I feel like I hold a lot of weight on having to be the person or source talking about it, because, again, I have the privilege to watch a work session or show up to a Tuesday at 10 a.m. meeting. And so then that holds a lot of weight of feeling like, all right, what do people want? Because I even asked Black and brown community members, I said, I don't want to be the middle class progressive who's fighting for DEI in words. If you guys actually want this because it's real jobs and you realize, oh no, we don't need to get cute. Let's keep our jobs. And but no, most of them was like, no, this is bullcrap. We should be standing up on, like, diversity, equity, and inclusion are structures of democracy and freedom. And so I'm just saying that, like, when do we stand up for democracy and freedom? If it's not this, I just would like to know what is the line that we're willing to fight against. And we're willing to say enough is enough. And we got to get to that conversation as a city of what is that line, because it's looking like it continues to come. You give them an inch, they ask for another one. And that's where Austin is, where it is at the state level, right? All the moderate Republicans, like, oh, we'll give them this, we'll give them this, we'll give them this. And now I don't think there is a moderate Republican in the state. So we've seen this crumble, and that's where I don't want that to happen to our city.
So speaking of Republicans and their next steps, we have Kelly Hancock, who is here locally serving as a state senator, who it has been announced is going to be running for the next Texas comptroller. And this is interesting because we've had some discussions here about what prompts people to run for office and how they go about running for office and what their resume is and when people run for various different seats. But in this situation, Kelly Hancock had to step down as senator in order to be considered to run for comptroller. But in the meantime, he has been appointed by the governor to be the chief clerk of the Texas comptroller office. So he's in the comptroller office right now. And I think that puts him in a stronger position to then run for to be the comptroller because he's kind of, I mean, it's almost like
experience,
he's, and it's also like he's the incumbent almost because he's like in the office. So the acting comptroller, he will then assume the role of the acting comptroller on July 1st. So he will literally be the incumbent at that point because Glenn Hagar is going to be
the chancellor
at Texas A&M University. So these are all the conversations and setting up of folks to run for office and pipeline filling and resume building that tends to happen for these seats. But then it also sets off a chain of who all might run for this seat next. We kind of had this similar situation when Kay Granger announced that she was not going to be running again, and Craig Goldman announced that he was going to run for that seat. And then there was a whole flurry of who's going to run for Kay's seat in addition to Craig Goldman, and who's going to run for Craig Goldman's seat at the state level when he runs at the federal level.
Yeah. One thing that annoys me about when this keeps happening is it feels emblematic of the Fort Worth way, where it's like, we're going to make a backroom deal where we're going to decide who's next in line, and we're just going to hand an elected office to them, when it's like, shouldn't there be democracy involved? Shouldn't we I
mean, I guess there still is an election, but yeah.
But by that point, you see everyone rally around a single candidate to the point where it doesn't even matter who else runs. It doesn't even matter how many people vote. It's like a foregone conclusion, which defeats the entire purpose of democracy, where you have multiple qualified candidates running and trying to convince you. And
it feels like this seat is going to get juicy. I mean, there's a lot of tea, but then there's also, we have a progressive running, Taylor Remmett. He is a union guy, works in aviation, Lockheed Martin. He has a progressive values, but is also just, I think, really a rising star. He's running. We'll see how he does. But I also think there's a lot of tea around possible people wanting to move in this position, because kind of that next step out of city or county is some state access, and it's easier to get appointed by Trump. It's easier to move up if you have some type of state access, a position. And so it could even get still pretty, I guess, a big amount of people you're voting it for. And I just find it interesting that in the Star-Telegram, it looks like Beau French was upset because there was no communication from Senator Hancock about this. And so I guess the Tarrant GOP feels blindsided, but it also looks like Hancock hasn't talked to him for a year or put any money into the Tarrant GOP. And so when we talk about, I don't know, is Kelly Hancock one of the, trying to get out of it? And so because he doesn't want to deal with the extremism of the state stuff. But then I'm confused because then he got appointed by the governor. And so is there even more infighting? Because we also saw the other day, governor actually voted against Dan Patrick, or vetoed for the THC thing. So maybe we're going to see some infighting that shows here. But I've had people talk about potentially Tim O'Hare for this kind of position.
Didn't Bud Kennedy tweet something about who was possibly going to run for Kelly Hancock's seat?
Bud Kennedy's tweet, only a wild guess, with Kelly Hancock, 4TX stepping up to comptroller. Possible text-ledge SD9 candidates include Manny Ramirez, Nate Scatzline, or Mayor Maddie Parker if she wants. She lives in the district, but she'll have to resign. So but Bud doesn't speculate a lot. I mean, he clearly said I'm speculating.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like he doesn't do these kind of tweets often.
Sounds unusual.
Yeah, so why this is exciting is, if I had to close this before we go to wins, losses, and actions, is we started with the excitement of the Oligarchy Tour, and before that, No Kings Rally, and before that, hundreds of people showing up to Commissioners Court. That momentum, plus whatever the heck's happening over in the right-wing side, it's leading into a combustion of, man, I think they're going to be an evolution of what Fort Worth is and who Fort Worth can be. And that to me is, for someone and for us who talks about Fort Worth on a weekly basis, we're going to be able to see the shaping and molding of what this future of this city wants to look like. And the listeners here, we have to know that we are contributors to what this city would look like.
And beyond just the speculation of Bud, Schatzline did say that he is considering it. That's in the article.
Yeah.
So he said he's prayerfully considering a run for Senate upon vacancy in the SD9 seat.
And for anyone who doesn't know who Nate Schatzline is, he is a leader at Mercy Culture, and he is the one who brought in the bill about arresting small business owners if they have books about anti-racism, LGBTQ history, or voices, or a different perspective on American history than, I guess, the founding father one. But basically, that's what Half Price Books was fighting against, was that bill that Nate Schatzline, Fort Worth rep, brought to state.
So now that we have added Wesley to the mix, and we have a producer who chimes in with his opinions as well, and we kind of started thinking about how we do our wins, losses, and calls to action, and feel like if we each individually do them, it kind of makes it choppy and sometimes ends up being a big old long list.
And a lot of times we have the same wins.
Exactly.
Same losses, yeah.
So today we are looking at our document where we kind of share with each other what we're thinking, and we ended up with a whole laundry list of wins. So we're going to share all of these wins with you today. Several of them are on transit, so I will definitely share the transit ones. Trinity Metro has been approved for a 10-year, $324 million contract extension of TEXRail, and the TRE operations are continuing. All of these things were kind of in limbo and jeopardy during the legislative session. So I think that's a really good thing. We spoke previously about high-speed rail and the study that Dallas did for their economic development. And now Arlington and Fort Worth have come together to fund a study on the economic impact of high-speed rail, which I think is definitely a win. Fort Worth is diving into looking at options to create more publicly accessible pools for residents. Yes. And I will tell you that this has been a bone that several people that I'm very close to have had to pick with the city of Fort Worth for years.
I grew up here, and I was at the pool every single week in the summer. And now, what do we got? 2 pools, I think,
and some agreements with some YMCA's and some different things.
But then you got to pay, like.
No, the agreements make it so you don't. They just announced the East Side YMCA. You don't have to be a member of the Y to utilize that. But I mean, the point is that there's a lot of people who don't have access to swimming at all,
or don't know that. I mean, as plugged in as I am, like I had no clue. So
yeah, well, that was a recent announcement, that the one on the YMCA on the East Side. But
some of us talked about pools with Heather Richardson about how, ever since like Black and brown communities have started to be able to use the pools, the amount of pools that are filled in our country.
No, they literally did that on purpose. Yeah. If they were going to be forced to allow Black and brown people to use the pool, they would just get rid of the pools in order to not have to do that.
Yep.
So I think, but speaking of Black and brown communities that don't have access to pools, I think the number of people who drowned because they don't learn how to swim is high. And as proud as I was of the drowning prevention program that was very much housed in District 9, having use of the Forest Park pool and some other locations to teach swimming,
we got to turn it down.
It's not enough.
We don't want Donald Trump to figure out that this is DEI. We don't want him to figure out it's DEI. We got to quit talking about pools.
Everybody
like
needs pools. In Texas, it's hot as hell.
It's not a DEI thing. Please fund pools.
But I think another win that we're talking about is could a Latino cultural museum open in Fort Worth? Study underway to explore those possibilities. Hundreds of Texans walked for Opal Lee at the annual Fort Worth Juneteenth celebration. And more than $10 million has been awarded for street improvements in 3 Tarrant County cities.
Yeah, and when I looked into that one, obviously a lot of it is in Fort Worth, but when it says street improvements, it's specifically talking bicycle and pedestrian safety. The stuff that TxDOT just always ignores, but the stuff that actually makes the city stay safe.
But speaking of TxDOT ignoring things, I will tell you that on the win side of what TxDOT has done is their active transportation plan is up right now for people to give input, and you have until early in July to give that input, and I'll give EJ the information so he can share it in the show notes. But they had a public meeting at Central Station. It's literally to improve active transportation, which is walking, biking, getting around other than in a car, and connecting to public transportation. And what has been highlighted is that 3% of Texans use those things to commute, and 10% of people in Texas use those things just recreational and to commute. And if TxDOT were to give 3% of their budget to those things, that's a massive amount of money. So we should push for them to
sounds like
at
we
least
could also
do 3%.
fund DEI with that. That's a lot of money.
Well, but like that 3%, if that was from TxDOT's budget, that's such a more cost-effective use of that money. Like the amount
Then adding
is
a lane
yes.
That's a
that
good.
just gets congested.
I feel like we could have had transportation as a short story. I'm surprised you guys didn't advocate for it.
I mean, it's a lot of unrelated stories, but
that was a
all
good.
It could have built up
things.
to a short story. That's true.
Yeah.
But I got it all in anyway.
Yeah, you did
a
so
great
I'm
job.
happy.
Still fit it in.
That's awesome. All right, so losses. What do we have, Wesley?
Speaking of cost-effective infrastructure, one of the losses that we have is that Fort Worth is behind on $66.1 million of street maintenance.
Per year. That's not just an overall number. It's every year they have that gap.
Exactly. And that's what annoys me so bad about the city's car-centric mindset is that it's not just the cost to put in a road, it's the cost of maintaining that road. And roads meant for cars take so much abuse that they just constantly need like a way more repair than you would assume. And so
And when you build those roads to only serve far-flung single-family neighborhoods, you're not collecting taxes equivalent to repair those roads. So even if a developer puts in those roads, it's on the city to maintain those roads, and they don't have the money. So that gap is just going to get bigger. And I know the city is talking about doing some kind of impact fee to try to fill that gap. But literally, it's
just such an expensive way to have a city is to just spread everything out so far for cars and just have all this constant maintenance on something.
Yep, it's a big loss.
Yeah,
we could do it different.
What's
do it better.
Wasn't there also something about like we couldn't even afford picking up trash or something like that as well? Like, wasn't that one of the things we were talking about, guys? About?
I mean, I think the maintenance part, they touched on the new street sweepers that they have maybe. And
okay.
I don't know.
But it just feels like where I'm like really concerned. I know we talked about the DEI stuff and the $277 million, which is 10% of our budget, but we're also in a deficit. So like,
if we just designed our cities different, it wouldn't be this bad if we just had different priorities.
Yeah, and who's in the discussion of like dealing with these deficits and dealing with how do we get out of these deficits?
I mean, we all have relied on, growth pays for growth. But if you allow the growth to be done in the way that we've allowed the growth to happen, it doesn't pay for itself.
And infinite growth isn't possible.
It's not.
That's a tumor. That's the only thing that grows infinitely that I know of.
It's not a good thing. But to your point about not being able to pick up the trash, I think there was in this conversation around rolling back the diversity and equity and inclusion was the first thing that was taken away. We had a contract with our waste management team that had a subcontractor that was a minority-owned business, and they removed that it
was like almost a year ago.
Like a year ago.
Another loss is a loss that I feel all the time. I live near where Panther Island will be, and they've been working on it since I was in middle school. And yet again, there is another holdup. And this time it's again the Army Corps of Engineers. No money. There's no construction going to be happening. So the timeline just keeps extending over and over.
So it looks like they're pushing this back until spring of 2026 because the Army Corps of Engineers has accepted contract proposals for the construction as early as fall of 2025. But due to some changes at the federal level, they're not going to be able to move forward with that at the current time.
Yep. So yet again, just got to keep waiting for Panther
But
Island
I love
to
that you
do
say
anything.
when Panther Island does get... I mean, you were very optimistic in your language to start.
I'm glad you bring the optimism.
I mean, they've got to.
They have
it's
to.
Insane
I mean, it literally
how much
was
time and money has been wasted on this thing.
We've moved... well, it hasn't been wasted if it comes to fruition.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like,
so they've moved utilities. They've
Yeah.
remediated environmental pollution. Mm-hmm. That's something we could learn and do in some other parts of our city as well.
Yep. I don't know. The sunk cost fallacy is so real in Panther Island. And I'm like, I would be happy. I hope one day my kids get to see it complete. Like, I think that's what it's going to take.
And I
my
hope
grandchildren.
it has a streetcar right through the middle of it.
Yes. My grandchildren will walk on the new Riverwalk and take the streetcar, and I'll be long dead.
All right, so for actions, we have two, really one, but one, if you are listening to this at the very second, we are going to have the vote for the DEI stuff with council at 10 a.m. on the 24th, which is basically right now. So we'll see how many people show up there and actually speak their concerns about how we manage that situation. But one we talked about earlier in action you could take is Tuesday, July 1st, the Tarrant County Commissioners Court meeting. You can sign up to speak against wasteful spending for an inevitable lawsuit. This is the conversation we're talking about, where we're talking about giving $250,000 of tax money to PILF to stand up against a lawsuit for racial gerrymandering. So
for just to them defend their racist map.
Yeah.
And also apparently they're going to tell us about their reason for stopping the LGBTQ marker. So you can show up and speak about that as well.
It takes all of us to lead, act, and share our voices. So continue to realize that, yes, we've had a lot of excitement with Bernie. We've had a lot of excitement with No Kings. But let's actually start moving into a place of proactive, being bold, showing up in the tough spaces, because activism is not influencer, social media. It is actually doing the tough things that people don't see. Speaking of doing tough things, we actually are going to have an interview next week with Allison Campolo, who is running for the Tarrant County Dem chair, which I'm excited to talk about. Where does Tarrant County go from here after all of this racial gerrymandering stuff? So we get to sit down with someone who's been in this work and has the comfortableness to really talk about it and share it how it is. And so we'll have that on the 29th. We are looking to have Tarrant Young Democrats on the 6th. So a lot of opportunities for us to start thinking about what's next after all this excitement.
Wesley Kirk coming from my home studio for one very important action that you can take this week. Go to Trinity Pride. It is Saturday, June 28th from 6 to 10 p.m. It is on South Main Street this year from Vickery to Broadway. They're taking over the whole area. You might have heard that they lost their typical space at Friday on the Green because a hotel is being built in the parking lot area that they typically use for vendors and stage. So this year they're doing something very special, very new, and they're bringing Pride to South Main. And they're doing it in a big way. It's going to be kicked off with a march/parade that'll be headed up by Councilwoman Elizabeth Beck. Me and my giant puppets that I built for Arts Goggle will be in the parade, along with my friends from LGBTQ Saves, my friends from Finn's Place, and so many amazing community partners. There's going to be events all up and down the street. Amphibian Stage is even hosting a Claws Out comedy drag show. It's seriously so important. It's so fun and joyous, but also, especially right now with LGBTQ rights being attacked on the federal level, on the state level, on the county level. We need to show up and support our community and make everyone feel safe and just have a good time. So I really hope that you can show up, and I really hope that you have a blast.